Alright, let's try part 2 of our project. Part 1 was this. We load the data from a file, and our goal is to take an ID number and look up everything else about that record. So for example, if I put 786841, then I'll get everything about Robert Gibson and his parent. Okay? This is fake data, but it's realistic. It's exactly the kind of thing we do get with our student records in the school. So actually, we do have that. If I put 786841, it will find Robert Gibson. But the problem is, this is just a line of stuff. It doesn't have any organization. I would have to know that index 0 is the student's last name, and index 4 is the parent last name, and so on. This was already bad enough when I made the dictionary. Line 3 points to line. Okay, what is that? I don't know. But if I were to use it and I were to say, okay, line 1 space line 0 to name the kid, and then line 6 to get the email, that would be really unreadable, really hard to fix if we had a problem, and really hard to change if we did something later. What if I got a new spreadsheet with a middle name, and that goes in here, and now everything else gets shifted over? So what used to be 3 is now 4, and what used to be 6 is now 7. Imagine the nightmare. Okay, so instead I want to use these in a nice object where I can say student.name or parent.email. So let's set that up. In some previous projects, we've made a class, but it's got this annoying boilerplate where you have to say self whatever, and then you say like self.name equals name, and you know how tedious it is. Everyone knows how tedious it is, so Python has a way to shorten this for not objects that are meant to be action oriented. If you have a ball bouncing around in a game, then you still probably want to do it the old way. But if you have objects that are data oriented, sometimes called records, then let me show you what we do. We have a thing called data class, and if you decorate your class with this, it allows you to name the attributes and the type, and it'll generate the init, it'll generate the printing, it'll generate comparison, all other stuff you might need. So I could say, okay, they got first, and that's a string. They've got last, and that's a string. They've got grade, and we'll call that an int because we might use it for sorting. They've got ID, but ID turns blue because it's a Python thing already, so I'm going to put ID underscore. I know that looks weird. We might change it later. And that's a string. Remember, even though it's a number, we're not going to do math. We're not going to like take the square root of your ID. So we're just going to treat it as characters in a row. And then they've got a parent, which is what? Well, it's a parent. Let's define that as another type. I know it takes a few lines, but once you've got this set up, it's so nice, because if a function spits out students, you can say, oh, this is a student. It's a thing we know. It's exactly specified on top, instead of a function spitting out like, oh, it's a list of 7 things, and you just have to know what order they're in and what they mean. I don't like that. So let's say, okay, we got a parent, and it's got first, last, and email. In some of my projects, I have name as its own class because I might want to have first, last, and maybe middle, and maybe title, and maybe other things. But in this case, first, last is fine. That's all we got. So now, instead of doing this to make the dictionary, I'm going to have a little function. I'm going to give it a pretty bland name, but we can rename it later. So what we're going to do, well, I'm going to say, okay, we'll start with the dictionary, and then we go through the lines saying, well, what's our key? We don't know yet. We have to unpack the line or destructure the line and make it so that right here is the only place we have to care about the index thing. I mentioned that, last name comes before first in the record, but last name comes after first in here. Should we care about that? No, I don't want to care about that. I want to make it so that when we're using this program, I just say student.first. I don't know where it came from. I don't know what column it was in. Who cares? This, if we play our cards right, this is the only place in the entire program, no matter how big it gets, where that matters. Okay? So we're going to describe the order of things, and we could copy this to give ourselves a little note. Okay? So we could say, all right, I'm going to go S last, like student last. And I know these names are ugly, but we're never going to use them again. Outside the function, they don't exist. So let's say S grade, SID, parent last, parent first, and parent email. Oh, no, line is what they're on. Okay? So like I said, I know this is ugly, but we're going to use it right now, and then we never have to care about it again. So lookup based on the ID is a student. So this function is going to spit out a dictionary that points to students. Instead of just pointing to blobs of stuff, it's going to point to a nice, organized, labeled, nice. I think I said nice twice, but that's how nice it is. Okay, so it's going to have S first, S last, grade, but I'll say int of grade because if we want it to be sortable, I'm not certain that 9 would come before 10 as a string, because like the character 9 comes after the character 1. But if they're ints, then I am certain. And then, do they need the ID? Yeah, even though it's the dictionary key, we'll still put it in there. Why not? And then they have a parent, which is its own thing. But I'm going to hit enter to make another line just so that it fits on the screen. If you have small text, you probably don't need that. And the parent has first and last and email. Okay, now I know that's a bit much. This part, I admit, is ugly, but the reason we're doing it is so that everything else can be pretty. Okay, it's like that meme of like, you know, my hands look like this, and it's some dirty work hands, so that hers can look like this or whatever. So let's say we return lookup. So now I'm going to say this guy is going to point to this thing. So it's going to take all that, nicely organize it. Let's see how it goes. 786-841, that'll be our test. Oh, I already thought of something that's going to mess up, because every line expects an integer for the grade, except that doesn't work on the top line, the header. Okay? Remember, this is just a file. The computer doesn't know what this means. It doesn't know that these are numbers or emails. They're just characters. And it doesn't know that the top line is a header. It's just another line. Okay? So, you know, if we have the CSV reader, we can just toss one of these by saying next, but we didn't use the CSV, we used the split method, so I could do this, say 1: meaning 1 onwards. This is actually inefficient because it makes a copy, but it'll work. Okay, now I forgot the ID I was going to look up, so let's do another one. Let's say 966-035. And it's found, and now look at that. It is an object which has a first name Ryan, a last name Brown Smith, a grade 9, and if I'm going to use this, which I am, we're going to make a little email that's like, dear parents of Ryan Brown Smith, and whose email is blah blah blah. Then maybe we use some other attributes later, sorting by grade or whatever. Then I never have to think about this file again. I never have to care what column things came from, how they were labeled, were they a certain type. Nope, doesn't matter. I have nice, beautiful Python objects, and that's worth 10 lines or so, plus a function. So that prepares us for the next step. I'll end this video here.